The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber gleamed under the light of 3 different suns. Inside, representatives from 200 alien species sat in their designated seats, each one looking down at the small human delegation below. The humans looked so tiny compared to the towering Vorthak warriors, the floating Etherian energy beings, and the massive shell-covered Krex elders. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the speaking platform, her hands folded behind her back. She looked calm, but those who knew humans well might have noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. Behind her sat the rest of Earth's diplomatic team, 5 humans in simple, dark suits that seemed plain compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by other species. Above them all, Speaker Valdris of the ancient Etherian collective floated in his energy form, his voice echoing through the chamber without need for vocal cords. The Etherians had been traveling between stars for over 10,000 years. To them, humanity was barely more than clever animals that had just learned to leave their home planet. The Council recognizes Commander Thraksh of the Vorthak Empire, Valdris announced. The massive Vorthak warrior rose from his seat. Thraksh stood nearly 9 feet tall, his forearms ending in claws that could tear through metal. His red skin bore the ritual scars of countless battles, each one telling a story of honor and victory. The bone crests on his skull marked him as nobility, a commander who had never known defeat. Honored Council, Thraksh's voice boomed through the chamber. The Vorthak Empire brings a matter of great importance. The humans have claimed mining rights to 17 systems in the outer spiral. These systems contain resources that rightfully belong to established members of this council. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several alien species nodded in agreement. The humans had joined the Galactic Council only 50 years ago, which was yesterday in galactic terms. Many species had been members for thousands of years. Thraksh continued, his forearms gesturing dramatically. The Vorthak Empire has protected these systems for over 8 centuries. We have fought and died to keep them safe from pirates and raiders. Now these newcomers claim they have the right to mine our world simply because they were the first to file proper paperwork. More murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. The Krex delegation clicked their approval with their massive claws. The insectoid, Zak species buzzed in harmony to show support. Even some of the more neutral species seemed to side with the Vorthak position. Ambassador Chen stepped forward. May I respond to these accusations? Speaker Valdris's energy form pulsed with what might have been amusement. The council recognizes the human delegation. Sarah Chen looked up at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at her. She had been Earth's ambassador for 12 years. She had sat through countless meetings where other species treated humans like children who needed guidance. She had smiled politely while alien diplomats explained how things worked in the real galaxy. She had bitten her tongue when species that had never fought a real war lectured her about military strategy. The 17 systems in question were unclaimed territory according to galactic law, Chen said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Earth followed all proper procedures. We filed exploration claims, conducted mineral surveys, and submitted our findings to the Council Registry. Everything was done exactly as the law requires. Commander Thraksh's bone crests flared with anger. Laws? You speak of laws? The Vorthak Empire has spilled blood for those systems. We have honor claims that go back centuries. What do you humans know of honor? Chen felt something cold settle in her stomach. She knew where this was heading. The Vorthak were a warrior culture that believed might made right. They respected only strength, and they saw humans as weak because Earth had never fought a major galactic war. We know enough about honor to follow the laws we agreed to when we joined this council, Chen replied. If the Vorthak Empire wanted to claim those systems, they should have filed the proper paperwork centuries ago. The chamber erupted in angry shouts and alien roars. Several species began arguing among themselves. The Vorthak delegation stood as one, their claws extended in challenge. Commander Thraksh's voice rose above the noise. Paperwork? You think your human paperwork means more than Vorthak blood? More than Vorthak honor? Speaker Valdris extended energy tendrils to restore order. The Council will maintain proper decorum. But Thraksh was beyond caring about decorum. His species had been warriors for thousands of years. They had conquered dozens of worlds through strength and courage. They would not be lectured by humans who had barely learned to leave their own solar system. The Vorthak Empire issues this ultimatum, Thraksh declared. The humans will withdraw their claims to all disputed systems within 30 standard days. They will pay compensation for the insult to Vorthak honor, and they will acknowledge that junior species do not challenge their betters. The chamber fell silent. This was not how diplomatic disputes were normally handled. Usually, such matters went to arbitration committees that spent years working out complex agreements. Direct ultimatums were considered crude and primitive. Ambassador Chen felt her heart rate increase, but her voice remained steady. Earth rejects this ultimatum. We will not abandon legal claims because someone threatens us. Commander Thraksh's claws scraped against the metal of his seat. Then you will learn what happens when young species forget their place. Speaker Valdris pulsed with concern. Commander Thraksh, the Council strongly advises against military action over territorial disputes. There are proper channels for resolving such matters. The Vorthak Empire has used your proper channels for 50 years, Thraksh snarled. We have watched while species that never fought for anything claim the rewards of our sacrifice. No more. The humans will learn to show proper respect, or they will be taught. The massive warrior turned to stare directly at Ambassador Chen. 30 days, human. Withdraw your claims and pay tribute or face the consequences. Chen stared back without flinching. Around her, she could feel the tension in the chamber. Most council members looked uncomfortable. They preferred their conflicts to be civilized, settled through negotiations and compromise. The Vorthak were threatening the kind of direct military action that hadn't been seen in the central galaxy for centuries. Earth's position remains unchanged, Chen said quietly. We will not abandon legal claims because of threats. Thraksh's bone crests flared again. He turned and stalked out of the chamber, followed by the rest of the Vorthak delegation. Their heavy footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Speaker Valdris floated down closer to the human delegation. Ambassador Chen, perhaps it would be wise to reconsider. The Vorthak are, passionate about matters of honor. Surely some compromise can be reached. Chen looked up at the ancient energy being. Valdris had been alive for over 3,000 years. He had seen the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. To him, the current dispute was just another minor territorial squabble that could be solved through patient negotiation. With respect, Speaker Valdris, Earth will not set the precedent that legal claims can be overturned through military threats. If we back down now, what message does that send to other species who might want to challenge human settlements? Several alien delegates nodded thoughtfully. They understood the principle, even if they thought the humans were being foolishly stubborn. In galactic politics, backing down from one threat often led to many more. Elder Kaiseth of the Krex spoke up, his voice like grinding stones. The humans show courage, but perhaps not wisdom. The Vorthak are mighty warriors. Their fleets have conquered many worlds. Ambassador Chen turned to face the massive Krex elder. We appreciate the concern, Elder Kaiseth, but Earth has faced threats before. Several alien delegates made what passed for chuckling sounds among their species. Earth's military history was well known in the Council database, but most species viewed it as primitive savagery rather than serious warfare. Humans fought with chemical explosives and projectile weapons. They had never faced antimatter cannons or gravity bombs. They knew nothing of real galactic warfare. The session ended with the usual diplomatic pleasantries, but everyone knew the real decisions would be made in private meetings over the following days. Ambassador Chen and her team returned to Earth's embassy, a modest building that looked tiny compared to the massive structures maintained by older species. That night, Chen sent an encrypted message to Earth. She reported on the day's events and recommended that all human colonies in the disputed systems be placed on high alert. She also suggested that the Colonial Defense Force begin moving ships into position, though she doubted they would be much use against serious Vorthak warships. On Tetiozing Dure, the Vorthak homeworld of Korath, Commander Thraksh knelt before the war council of his people. The 7 greatest warriors of the Vorthak Empire sat in their ceremonial armor, their bone crests marking them as the ultimate authority of their species. The humans refused to show proper respect, Thraksh reported. They hide behind their paperwork and ignore the honor of our blood claims. War leader Drakmor, eldest of the council, leaned forward. His scars were so numerous they formed patterns across his red skin. He had led the Vorthak to victory in dozens of campaigns over the past centuries. Against serious galactic military technology, Thraksh opened communications with the colony's governor. Human leader, I am Commander Thraksh of the Vorthak Empire. Your species has shown disrespect to ancient claims of honor. We are here to correct this mistake. Governor Martinez appeared on the communication screen. He was an older man with gray hair and worried eyes. Commander, this is a peaceful colony. We have women and children here. Surely any dispute can be resolved through negotiation. Negotiation has failed, Thraksh replied. Your leaders chose defiance over wisdom. Now you will see the price of such foolishness. Evacuate all civilian areas. We will begin targeted strikes on military and industrial facilities in 1 standard hour. The next hour was chaos on New Geneva. Families loaded into ground vehicles and fled to the countryside. The few military personnel on the planet began broadcasting surrender signals, hoping to minimize damage. Most colonists had never seen war beyond historical documentaries. Thraksh's fleet began its demonstration. Plasma beams lanced down from orbit, destroying the small military base in seconds. The orbital station vanished in a brief flash of light. Industrial facilities were reduced to glowing craters. The strikes were precise and professional. The Vorthak weapons officers had centuries of experience. They could destroy a building without damaging structures next to it. This was meant to be a lesson, not a massacre. But technology, even advanced technology, sometimes fails. The targeting computer on Thraksh's flagship suffered a minor malfunction, the kind of small error that happens once in millions of operations. A plasma beam meant for a communications facility shifted 3 degrees off target. The beam hit the New Geneva Children's Hospital. 847 children died in that moment. They were playing in the recreation areas, sleeping, in their beds, being treated for minor illnesses and injuries. The plasma beam vaporized the entire building in less than a second. Thraksh stared at his tactical display in horror. The targeting officer checked and rechecked the readings, his claws shaking as he confirmed what had happened. Commander, the officer whispered, we hit a civilian facility, a medical center for younglings. Thraksh felt something cold settle in his chest. The Vorthak were warriors, but they were not monsters. They had codes of honor that went back thousands of years. The protection of younglings was sacred to all civilized species. Cease fire, Thraksh ordered. All ships, cease fire immediately. He opened an emergency channel to New Geneva's government center. Governor Martinez, there has been a terrible accident. One of our weapons malfunctioned. We struck a medical facility. Governor Martinez's face appeared on screen, streaked, with tears. The children's hospital, he whispered. You destroyed the children's hospital. Thraksh had never felt such shame in his life. Governor, please understand this was not intentional. Our targeting systems failed. We offer immediate medical assistance and full reparations according to Galactic law. But Martinez had already cut the communication. Within hours, news of the tragedy spread across human space. Images of the destroyed hospital appeared on every screen. Names and faces of the dead children were broadcast continuously. The galaxy watched as humanity mourned its young. Ambassador Chen received the news in her embassy office. She sat in silence for a long time, staring at the list of casualties. 847 names. 847 futures that would never be. Then she began making calls, first to Earth's government, then to military commanders, then to contacts throughout human space. Each conversation was brief and quiet, but the message was always the same. The children were dead. Someone would pay. The Galactic Council immediately called for an emergency session. The Vorthak formally apologized and offered massive reparations. Commander Thraksh publicly took full responsibility for the accident. By every measure of galactic law and custom, the matter should have been closed. But humanity went silent. For 3 days, no human official made any public statement. Earth's embassy stopped taking calls from other species. Human colonies throughout. The galaxy ceased all normal communications. The silence was absolute and terrifying. On the 4th day, Ambassador Chen walked into the council chamber. She looked smaller and more fragile than ever, her face pale with grief. The entire gallery watched as she approached the speaking platform. The government of Earth accepts the Vorthak Empire's apology for the tragic accident at New Geneva, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We acknowledge that the deaths were unintentional. Relief rippled through the chamber. The crisis would pass. Humanity would be reasonable. Chen continued. Earth hereby withdraws all territorial claims in the disputed systems. We will sign any peace treaty the Vorthak Empire desires. We want no further conflict with your people. Speaker Valdris pulsed with satisfaction. The Council is pleased that this matter can be resolved peacefully. Ambassador Chen, your species shows wisdom in choosing compromise over confrontation. Chen nodded slowly. We are, after all, just a young species. We have much to learn about how things work in the galaxy. She turned to leave, then paused. There is one small request. Earth would like to establish a memorial for the children who died. Something simple, just to help our people process their grief. We request 30 days to complete this memorial before signing the final peace accords. The request seemed entirely reasonable. Every species understood the need to mourn the dead. Granted, Speaker Valdris said immediately. Take whatever time you need. Chen bowed respectfully and left the chamber. Behind her, the various alien delegations began discussing how impressed they were with human maturity. The crisis had ended, with minimal fuss. None of them noticed that Chen never actually said what kind of memorial Earth planned to build. And none of them knew that Earth's military had been mobilizing for war since the moment the first child died on New Geneva. The HFY silence was about to end. And when it did, the galaxy would learn that humans did not build memorials out of stone. The human industrial complex had been quiet for 50 years. When Earth joined the Galactic Council, they had agreed to limit their military production in favor of trade and diplomacy. The massive shipyards that had built humanity's first interstellar fleet were converted to civilian use. Weapons factories became manufacturing centers for consumer goods. The galaxy saw this as proof that humans were learning to be civilized. But the galaxy had misunderstood what they were seeing. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood in the command center deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain, looking at screens that most humans had forgotten existed. He was 63 years old, with silver hair and scars on his hands from his time as a Marine. He had fought in the last colonial wars before Earth's admission to the Council, and he remembered what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. Status report, Rodriguez said to the room full of officers around him. Colonel Sarah Kim looked up from her tactical display. She was young for her rank, promoted quickly during the peacetime military. But her family had come from old Korea, and she understood what total war meant. All defense contractors have received activation codes, Kim reported. Lockheed Martin is retooling their civilian ship production. Boeing has recalled all their military engineers from retirement. The Russians have opened their sealed weapons facilities. China has activated their hidden shipyards. Rodriguez nodded. After joining the Council, Earth had signed treaties promising to limit military production. But humans had learned long ago never to completely disarm. Hidden facilities, maintained equipment, retired personnel who could be recalled in emergencies, all of it had been kept ready just in case. What about the colonies? Every human settlement outside the Sol system is evacuating non-essential personnel, Kim replied. The mining colonies are shipping their equipment to secure locations. Agricultural worlds are stockpiling food and medical supplies. Rodriguez walked to the main display screen, which showed the positions of every known Vorthak military asset in the galaxy. The alien empire was powerful. Their 12 battle fleets contained over 3,000 ships. Each one was larger and more advanced than anything in Earth's official navy. But Rodriguez wasn't looking at their official navy. "Give me the real numbers," he said quietly. Kim hesitated, then pulled up classified files that hadn't been opened in decades. "If we activate everything, Project Deep Strike has 1,800 ships ready for immediate deployment. Another 3,000 can be completed within 6 months. The weapons stockpiles contain enough antimatter warheads to glass every Vorthak world simultaneously." The other officers in the room fell silent. They had known about some of humanity's hidden military assets, but seeing the full scope was overwhelming. Earth had spent 50 years pretending to be a peaceful species, while secretly preparing for the kind of total war that most galactic civilizations had forgotten was possible. Rodriguez studied the numbers. During humanity's expansion into space, they had learned harsh lessons about survival. Pirates, hostile aliens, resource wars, humanity had faced them all. The Galactic Council offered peace and stability, but humans remembered that peace was something you prepared for by being ready for war. "What about the Vorthak response to our diplomatic activities?" Kim pulled up intelligence reports. "Commander, Thraksh has been recalled to face a formal inquiry about the New Geneva incident. War leader Drakmor issued a public statement expressing regret for the accident. They're offering to pay for reconstruction of the hospital and compensation for all families affected. And their military posture? Unchanged. They have token patrols in the disputed systems, but nothing that suggests they expect retaliation. Their intelligence services rate humanity as minimal military threat in their latest assessment." Rodriguez almost smiled. The Vorthak were good soldiers and honorable warriors, but they thought like soldiers and warriors. They expected Earth to respond with angry words and formal protests. They expected human retaliation to follow the same patterns as their own conflicts, direct confrontation between military forces with clear rules and honor codes. They had no idea what human military doctrine actually looked like. "Activate Operation Memorial," Rodriguez ordered. Colonel Kim's fingers hesitated over her control panel. "Sir, once we begin, there's no taking it back. The aliens will see what we're really capable of." Rodriguez thought about the images from New Geneva. 847 small coffins, 847 families destroyed, 847 futures erased by what the Vorthak called an accident. "Good," Rodriguez said. "It's time they learned." Across human space, the real military machine began to wake up. Hidden shipyards powered up their construction systems. Sealed weapons facilities opened their blast doors. Retired officers reported for duty. Scientists who had been working on peaceful research projects suddenly found themselves reassigned to military applications, but none of it was obvious from outside human space. The Vorthak intelligence services watched Earth's public activities and saw exactly what they expected to see: a grieving species trying to cope with tragedy through diplomacy. Human news broadcasts showed memorial services and calls for peace. Earth's official military remained at normal readiness levels. The few human warships in space continued their regular patrol routes. Commander Thraksh sat in his quarters aboard the Vorthak flagship, writing his formal report on the New Geneva incident. The inquiry board would review his actions and determine whether he had violated military protocols. He expected to be relieved of command, possibly exiled from the warrior caste entirely. It was a heavy price to pay for an accident, but Thraksh accepted it. He had been responsible for the mission, and therefore responsible for its tragic consequences. That was the Vorthak way. Leaders took accountability for their failures. His aide entered the cabin and bowed respectfully. "Commander, we have received a message from the human ambassador." Thraksh looked up from his report. "What do they want now?" "Ambassador Chen requests a private meeting. She says Earth wishes to discuss the memorial arrangements and ensure they do not violate any Vorthak cultural sensitivities." Thraksh frowned. The request seemed reasonable, even thoughtful. Most species would want to ensure their memorials didn't accidentally insult the people involved in the tragedy. Schedule the meeting, Thraksh decided, and inform the ambassador that I will answer any questions she has about the incident. The families of the dead deserve to know exactly what happened. 3 days later, Ambassador Chen arrived at the Vorthak embassy on the neutral world of Kepler Station. She came alone, without guards or aides. She wore a simple black dress that humans traditionally used for mourning. Thraksh met her in a private conference room. Up close, the massive Vorthak commander looked even more imposing, but Chen noticed that his bone crests were dulled, a sign of shame among his people. Ambassador, Thraksh said formally, I want you to know that I take full responsibility for what happened on New Geneva. If I could trade my life for those children, I would do so without hesitation. Chen studied his face. She had read the intelligence files on Vorthak culture and psychology. Everything about Thraksh's posture and expression suggested genuine remorse. He was a warrior who had accidentally broken his own code of honor, and the guilt was eating him alive. I believe you, Chen said quietly. The technical analysis of your weapon systems confirms it was a malfunction, not intentional targeting. Thraksh's forearms relaxed slightly. Then, you understand that we are not monsters? That this was truly an accident? I understand. That you never meant to kill children, Chen replied. But Commander, I need you to understand something about humans. Intent doesn't matter when our children are dead. Something in her tone made Thraksh's warrior instincts activate. Chen still looked small and fragile, but there was something different about her now. Something cold. What exactly are you saying, Ambassador? Chen reached into her bag and pulled out a small device, a holographic projector. She activated it, and the air above the table shimmered with images. The first image showed New Geneva's Children's Hospital before the attack. Thraksh could see human younglings playing in the gardens outside, their parents watching nearby. It looked peaceful and innocent. The second image showed the same location after the plasma strike. Nothing remained but a crater of melted stone and metal. Emergency workers searched through the debris, but Thraksh could see from their posture that they weren't expecting to find survivors. 847 children, Chen said, her voice still quiet. The youngest was 2 years old. The oldest was 16. They died instantly, so they didn't suffer. I suppose that's something. Thraksh stared at the images, his shame growing heavier. Ambassador, we have offered full reparations. By Galactic law, Galactic law, Chen interrupted, was written by species that fight civilized wars. Species that have learned to limit casualties and follow rules of engagement. Species that see warfare as a game with winners and losers, not a matter of survival. The holographic images shifted, showing historical footage from Earth. Thraksh saw human cities in flames, massive armies marching across devastated landscapes, weapons that turned entire regions into wastelands. This is how humans learned to fight, Chen continued, not with honor codes or limited objectives. We learned that when someone threatens your family, your children, your future, you don't try to win. You try to make sure the threat never exists. Again. Thraksh's claws extended unconsciously. His warrior training was telling him that he was in danger, but he couldn't understand why. Chen was unarmed, alone, and physically weak compared to him. Yet something about her presence was setting off every survival instinct he possessed. What are you saying? Thraksh asked again. Chen deactivated the holographic projector and put it away. When she looked up at him, her eyes were completely calm. I'm saying that you need to understand what kind of memorial we're building for those children, she said. It's not going to be made of stone or metal. It's not going to be, something you can visit or touch. She stood up and walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. Our memorial is going to be the complete certainty that no one will ever kill human children again. Ever. Because anyone who tries is going to discover what happens when you mistake human mercy for human weakness. After Chen left, Thraksh sat alone in the conference room for a long time. He tried to analyze what he had just heard, but it didn't make sense according to his understanding of human behavior. Humans were supposed to be reasonable, diplomatic, civilized. They were supposed to value life above conquest. He finally decided that Chen was simply speaking from grief and anger. Humans were emotional creatures, and the loss of so many younglings would naturally cause them to say things they didn't really mean. Thraksh filed a routine report noting that the meeting had gone well and that humans seemed committed to peaceful resolution of the crisis. He never sent another report. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, humanity's real response was taking shape. Deep in the asteroid belt of the Sol system, construction facilities that hadn't been active in 50 years came back to life. Automated mining systems began extracting raw materials at maximum capacity. Assembly lines designed to build warships instead of civilian vessels started their production cycles. The ships being built were not like anything in the official human fleet. These were vessels designed according to Earth's actual military doctrine, not the limited designs they had shown to the Galactic Council. They carried weapons that most alien species had never imagined. Devices developed during humanity's expansion period when survival had depended on being more dangerous than anything else in space. Admiral Rodriguez watched the production reports with satisfaction. Within 6 months, humanity would have the largest space-based military force in known galactic history. More importantly, it would be a force designed for the kind of warfare that galactic civilizations had forgotten existed. Status on infiltration assets? Rodriguez asked. Colonel Kim pulled up a new set of displays. Special operations teams have been inserted into all major Vorthak systems. They're using captured alien technology to avoid detection. Current assets include 200 combat teams and 50 technical specialists. Rodriguez nodded. The infiltration teams were Earth's real masterpiece. While the galaxy saw humans as primitive because they used chemical explosives and projectile weapons, they had overlooked humanity's greatest military advantage, the ability to adapt and improvise. Human special operations soldiers had spent decades studying captured alien technology. They couldn't build antimatter weapons or gravity bombs, but they could steal them, modify them, and use them in ways their creators never intended. Any contact with Vorthak intelligence services? Negative. Their security systems are designed to detect other galactic standard technologies. They're not programmed to recognize human infiltration techniques. This was the fundamental mistake that every alien species made when analyzing human military capabilities. They judged Earth's forces by galactic standards. How many ships, what kind of weapons, which technologies they possessed. They never considered how humans actually fought when their survival was threatened. Humans didn't fight fair. They didn't follow rules of engagement unless forced to. They didn't respect the idea that warfare should be limited or civilized. When pushed to the edge, humanity reverted to the same mindset that had carried them through 10,000 years of evolution on a world where everything was trying to kill them. What about the Galactic Council? Rodriguez asked. They're pleased. With human diplomatic maturity, Kim reported with just a hint of irony. Several species have commented favorably on our peaceful response to the New Geneva incident. The Etherian Collective issued a statement praising humanity for choosing compromise over conflict. Rodriguez studied the tactical displays showing Vorthak fleet positions throughout the galaxy. 12 battle fleets spread across dozens of systems, protecting an empire that had stood for over 2,000 years. Soon those fleets would discover what human compromise actually looked like. Timeline for Phase 1? All assets will be in position within 18 days. Once we begin, the Vorthak Empire will have approximately 72 hours before their command and control systems are completely compromised. Rodriguez had fought in enough wars to know that the most dangerous moment was always right before the shooting started. Once Operation Memorial began, there would be no possibility of stopping it. Earth would reveal its true military capabilities to the galaxy, and the political consequences would last for centuries. But every time he hesitated, Rodriguez remembered the images from New Geneva. 847 small bodies pulled from the wreckage of a children's hospital. 847 families who would never be whole again. The Vorthak had wanted to teach humanity about consequences. They were about to learn that lesson themselves. Execute Phase 1, Rodriguez ordered. Across the galaxy, human infiltration teams received their activation codes. Ships that had been hiding in deep space for weeks began moving toward their targets. Weapon systems that existed only in classified files were loaded and armed. The memorial for the children of New Geneva was about to begin, and when it was finished, no one would ever mistake human grief for human weakness again. The first strike came without warning. The sacred world of Kortheval had been the spiritual center of the Vorthak Empire for over 1,500 years. Ancient temples covered the planet's surface, each one containing artifacts that told the story of Vorthak civilization. Young warriors came here to learn about their ancestors. Elders came here to meditate on honor and duty. It was a place of peace, protected by treaty and tradition. It had no military value whatsoever. High Priest Yorthak was conducting morning prayers when the sky began to burn. He looked up through the temple's crystal dome and saw streaks of light falling from orbit. Not the gentle glow of normal spacecraft, but the harsh brilliance of objects moving at tremendous speed. The first impacts came in the northern continent. Yorthak felt the ground shake beneath his feet as massive explosions erupted hundreds of miles away. The crystal dome cracked, sending rainbow patterns across the temple floor. "What is happening?" whispered one of the younger priests. Yorthak activated the temple's communication system and tried to contact the orbital defense platforms. Static answered him. He tried the planetary government center. More static. Every frequency was either dead or filled with electronic noise. More streaks of light fell from the sky. This time they were closer. Yorthak realized with growing horror that someone was systematically destroying every important site on Kortheval, the ancient library where Vorthak military history was preserved, the monument gardens where the names of fallen warriors were carved in stone, the meditation centers where young Vorthak learned the philosophy of honorable combat. All of it was being erased. The final strike hit the great temple itself, the most sacred site in all of Vorthak space. Yorthak had just enough time to see a single object falling toward them, moving faster than anything he had ever imagined. The antimatter warhead vaporized the entire temple complex in a flash of light that could be seen from orbit. When the light faded, nothing remained but a crater of melted rock 3 miles wide. Similar strikes were happening across Vorthak space, not on military worlds or industrial centers, but on every planet that held cultural or spiritual significance to the Empire. Within 6 hours, 2,000 years of Vorthak civilization had been reduced to radioactive craters. War leader Drakmor received the first reports in his command center on the Vorthak homeworld. He stared at the tactical displays in disbelief, trying to understand what he was seeing. 18 sacred worlds, his intelligence officer reported. Complete destruction of all cultural sites. No military targets were engaged. No demands have been made. No one has claimed responsibility. Drakmor's claws scraped against his command chair. In all his centuries of warfare, he had never seen anything like this. Military strikes were supposed to have objectives: capture territory, destroy enemy forces, force surrender. This was something else entirely. What about our defensive fleets? Untouched. The attackers avoided all military installations. They only targeted... The officer hesitated. They only targeted places that matter to our people's identity. The communication system activated with an incoming transmission. Drakmor expected to see human military commanders demanding surrender, or perhaps Galactic council mediators calling for peace talks. Instead, he saw a simple message in perfect Vorthak script. "You killed 847 of our children. We have destroyed 847 of your most sacred sites. This is just the beginning." The transmission ended. Drakmor stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he began issuing orders. Contact all fleet commanders. Emergency mobilization of all military assets. Contact the Galactic Council and demand they order the humans to cease hostilities immediately. But even as he gave the orders, Drakmor knew they were pointless. His fleets were designed to fight other fleets, not to protect cultural sites scattered across dozens of worlds. And the Galactic Council had no enforcement power over species that chose to ignore their authority. For the first time in his long life, the greatest warrior of the Vorthak Empire felt truly helpless. The attack on the sacred worlds was only the beginning. Human infiltration teams had been positioning themselves throughout Vorthak space for weeks, using stolen alien technology to avoid detection. They carried weapons that no galactic civilization had seen before, devices that Earth's military engineers had developed by combining human innovation with captured alien technology. Captain Maria Santos led one of these teams on the Vorthak, military world of Garthek. She was 32 years old, a veteran of the colonial wars who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of her career. Her team consisted of 12 special operations soldiers, each one trained to operate independently, behind enemy lines. "Target is the Vorthak Naval Academy," Santos whispered into her communicator as her team moved through the alien city under cover of darkness. "Intelligence indicates this facility has trained Vorthak officers for over 8 centuries. The Naval Academy was a massive complex of buildings constructed from the same red stone as traditional Vorthak architecture. Thousands of young warriors came here each year to learn space combat tactics, fleet coordination, and the honor codes that governed Vorthak military behavior." Santos and her team approached the main building through underground utility tunnels. The Vorthak had never faced human infiltration tactics, so their security systems were designed to detect known alien technologies. They couldn't recognize the modified equipment that human engineers had cobbled together from stolen components. "Charges placed," reported Sergeant Chen over the team radio. "Neutron devices are armed and ready." Neutron weapons were among humanity's most terrible innovations. Unlike antimatter bombs or plasma strikes that destroyed everything in their area of effect, neutron weapons killed living things while leaving buildings and equipment intact. The academy would still be standing when the sun rose, but everything inside would be dead. "All teams report ready," Santos said into her communicator. Around the planet, 11 other human teams had infiltrated similar targets: military training centers, officer academies, strategic planning facilities, every institution that taught young Vorthak how to wage war. "Execute," came the order from orbit. Santos pressed the detonation control. The neutron devices activated simultaneously across the planet. There were no explosions, no visible signs of destruction. The buildings remained intact. The lights still functioned. Even the computer systems continued operating normally. But everyone inside was dead. Santos and her team evacuated through the same tunnels they had used to infiltrate the academy. By morning, they would be back aboard their stealth ship, heading to the next target on their list. The Vorthak would find the bodies eventually. Thousands of their finest young officers, their most experienced instructors, their brightest military minds, all dead without a mark on them. The facilities where they had trained warriors for centuries would be perfectly preserved, but completely empty. It would take the Vorthak Empire decades to rebuild their military leadership. By then, it might not matter. Similar operations were taking place throughout Vorthak space. Every military academy, every training center, every facility that produced the next generation of Vorthak warriors, all of them were being systematically eliminated. The humans weren't trying to destroy the Vorthak military directly. They were destroying its ability to regenerate itself. Admiral Rodriguez monitored the operations from his command center deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain. Status reports flowed across his screens as human teams completed their missions throughout the galaxy. "Phase 2 complete," Colonel Kim reported. "All primary objectives have been eliminated. Vorthak military training capacity has been reduced by an estimated 97%. Rodriguez studied the tactical displays. In less than 48 hours, humanity had crippled the Vorthak Empire's ability to maintain its military forces over the long term. But this was still just the beginning of Operation Memorial. Status on Phase 3 preparations? "All assets are in position," Kim replied. "We're ready to begin systematic elimination of Vorthak population centers." Rodriguez paused. Phase 3 would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Up until now, human strikes had targeted military and cultural sites while avoiding civilian casualties. Phase 3 would change that calculus entirely. But then he remembered the children of New Geneva, and his resolve hardened. "Begin Phase 3, Rodriguez ordered. Across the galaxy, human battle fleets that had been hiding in deep space began moving toward their final targets. These were not the small ships that the Galactic Council knew about. but massive vessels built in secret over the past 50 years. Each one carried enough firepower to sterilize an entire planet. The Vorthak homeworld of Korath was the first to detect the approaching human fleet. Long-range sensors picked up the signatures of 60 ships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. War leader Drakmor looked at the sensor readings in confusion. According to every intelligence report he had ever seen, the humans possessed fewer than 30 major warships. Yet his sensors were clearly showing twice that number, and the energy signatures suggested vessels far more powerful than anything in Earth's known arsenal. Open communications with the human fleet, Drakmor ordered. The main display screen activated, showing the bridge of the human flagship. A middle-aged woman in a simple military uniform looked back at him. Her name tag read Admiral Chen, apparently a relative of the human ambassador who had visited Commander Thrakkerj. "I am war leader Drakmor of the Vorthak Empire," he began, using the formal protocols for communication between military commanders. "You have entered Vorthak space without authorization and conducted acts of war against our people. I demand an explanation." Admiral Chen studied him for a moment before responding. "War leader, my name is Admiral Lisa Chen. I'm here to deliver a message from the human government." "Then speak your message." "The message is very simple," Chen replied. "You killed our children. Now we're going to kill everything you care about. Your sacred worlds are gone. Your military academies are empty. Your cultural heritage has been erased. And now we're going to start on your civilians." Drakmor felt his blood freeze. "You cannot mean to attack defenseless populations. That would violate every law of civilized warfare." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "War leader, you seem to be under the impression that we're fighting a civilized war. We're not. This is what humans call total war. It means we don't stop until our enemy no longer exists as a functional civilization." The communication ended. Drakmor stared at the blank screen, trying to process what he had just heard. In all his studies of galactic military history, he had never encountered the concept of total war. Civilized species fought for territory, resources, or political objectives. They didn't fight to completely destroy their enemies. But humans apparently did. "Contact the Galactic Council immediately," Drakmor ordered. "Inform them that the humans are planning genocide against the Vorthak people. Demand immediate intervention." His communications officer tried for several minutes before reporting back. "War leader, I cannot establish contact with the council chambers. All communication frequencies are being jammed." Drakmor realized that the humans had planned for this contingency as well. They had isolated the Vorthak Empire from any outside help before beginning their final assault. The human fleet began moving toward Korath's population centers. Drakmor ordered his own fleets to intercept them, but he quickly discovered another unpleasant surprise. The human ships were faster than anything in the Vorthak arsenal, more maneuverable, better armed. They had been designed according to military principles that the Vorthak didn't understand, optimized for the kind of warfare that galactic civilizations had forgotten existed. When the two fleets finally engaged in battle above Korath, the result was not a fight but a massacre. Human ships moved through Vorthak formations like predators among prey, their weapons cutting through alien defenses as if they didn't exist. In less than 2 hours, the Vorthak home fleet, the pride of their empire, was reduced to debris floating in space. Admiral Chen opened communications again. "War leader, you now have a choice. You can evacuate your civilian population and surrender all claims to the disputed systems, or you can watch us reduce your homeworld to ash." Drakmor looked at the tactical display showing the remains of his fleet, then at the human ships positioning themselves in orbit above his planet's major cities. "You have won," he said quietly. "The Vorthak Empire surrenders unconditionally. Please, spare our people." "The Vorthak Empire," Admiral Chen replied, "no longer exists. What happens to your people now depends on whether they understand that fact." The communication ended, and Drakmor was left staring at his planet's new reality. In less than 3 days, the mighty Vorthak Empire, a civilization that had dominated its region of space for 2 millennia, had been completely destroyed as a political and military entity. Their sacred worlds were radioactive craters. Their military academies were empty tombs. Their battle fleets were space debris. And the humans weren't finished yet. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy as word of the Vorthak's destruction spread. Every species that had diplomatic relations with Earth was receiving the same message. This is what happens when you kill human children. Learn from it. The galaxy was beginning to understand that they had made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. Earth wasn't a peaceful species learning to be civilized. Earth was a predator species that had been pretending to be civilized, and now the pretense was over. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Representatives from 200 species filled the chamber, their voices creating a cacophony of fear and confusion in dozens of different languages. The massive crystal dome that normally let in gentle starlight now seemed to trap them under its weight. Speaker Valdris floated at the center of the chamber, his energy form pulsing with distress. In 3,000 years of life, he had never witnessed anything like the systematic destruction of the Vorthak Empire. Ancient civilizations were supposed to decline slowly, over centuries or millennia. They weren't supposed to be erased in less than a week. "Order," Valdris called, his voice carrying across the chamber. "The council will maintain proper decorum." But decorum seemed impossible as reports continued flowing in from across the galaxy. The Vorthak homeworld was under human occupation. Refugee ships carrying the survivors of 18 sacred worlds were scattered throughout neutral space. The proud warrior culture that had stood for 2,000 years had been reduced to homeless beggars in less than 72 hours. Elder Kaiseth of the Krex spoke first, his massive shell clicking with agitation. "How is this possible? Our intelligence reports indicated that humans possessed minimal military capabilities. Their official fleet contained only 28 vessels." Ambassador Chen sat in the human delegation area, looking smaller and more fragile than ever. Behind her, the other human representatives watched the proceedings with calm expressions that somehow seemed more threatening than any display of anger. "The question," rumbled Ambassador Thexatar of the Zephyrian hegemony, "is not how they did it. The question is why they did it. This level of destruction goes far beyond any reasonable response to the New Geneva incident." Several species voiced their agreement. The accidental death of civilians during military operations was tragic but common in galactic warfare. Reparations were paid, apologies were made, and life continued. What the humans had done was completely unprecedented. "Perhaps," suggested diplomat Yathara of the Crystalline Union, "we should ask the humans to explain their actions." All eyes turned to Ambassador Chen. She stood slowly and walked to the speaking platform, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. When she reached the center of the chamber, she looked up at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at her. "You want to know why we destroyed the Vorthak Empire?" Chen said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "The answer is simple. They killed our children." "But it was an accident," protested Counselor Vexthai of the Aquatic Coalition. Commander Thrakish himself admitted the targeting malfunction. Reparations were offered. Chen nodded slowly. "Yes, it was an accident. And yes, reparations were offered. Under galactic law, the matter should have been closed." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But you see, galactic law was written by species that have never faced extinction. Species that have never had to fight for their right to exist. Species that can afford to treat warfare as a game with rules and limits." The chamber fell silent as Chen continued. "Humans learned to fight on a world where everything was trying to kill us. We didn't have the luxury of civilized warfare. We didn't have honor codes or limited objectives. When something threatened our survival, we had two choices: destroy it completely or be destroyed ourselves." Elder Kaiseth leaned forward. "But surely you understand the difference between individual survival and what you have done to the Vorthak." Chen looked directly at the massive Krex elder. "Do you have children, Elder Kaiseth?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. Yes. Many offspring. And if someone killed those offspring, even by accident, what would you do? I would seek justice through proper channels. File formal complaints. Demand reparations according to... You would follow procedures, Chen interrupted. Because your species has always been safe. Your homeworld is protected. Your children grow up without fear. You can afford to trust in systems and laws because those systems have never failed you. She turned to address the entire chamber. Humans cannot afford that luxury. Our history is written in the blood of children who died because their parents trusted that others would protect them. We learned, through 10,000 years of war and genocide and extinction events, that when someone kills your young, you don't negotiate with them. You ensure they never have the opportunity to do it again. The silence in the chamber was absolute. The Vorthak Empire no longer exists, Chen continued, because we wanted to send a message to the galaxy. The message is this: human children are not acceptable casualties. They are not collateral damage. They are not the price of doing business. Anyone who harms them for any reason will face consequences that make the destruction of the Vorthak look merciful. Counselor Vexithai's aquatic suit bubbled with agitation. You speak of proportional response. 800 children died on New Geneva. How many Vorthak have died in your retaliation? None, Chen replied calmly. The chamber erupted in confusion. Several translators asked for clarification, assuming they had misunderstood. None, Chen repeated. We destroyed their sacred sites with precision strikes that avoided civilian casualties. We eliminated their military academies using weapons that killed only the personnel inside. We defeated their fleets in space combat. But we have not deliberately targeted Vorthak civilian populations. Elder Kaiseth's shell clicked in bewilderment. Then, what was the purpose of such destruction? Chen smiled, and somehow that expression was more terrifying than any display of anger. We didn't kill the Vorthak people, Elder Kaiseth. We killed their civilization, their culture, their ability to see themselves as mighty warriors. We took away everything that made them who they were, and we left them alive to remember what they had lost. She gestured to the viewing screen, which displayed images of Vorthak refugee ships. Look at them. Once proud warriors reduced to begging for charity from species they used to consider inferior. Their children will grow up in exile, learning alien languages and alien customs. In 3 generations there will be no one left who remembers what it meant to be Vorthak. The horror of it began to sink in around the chamber. Physical genocide was terrible, but what the humans had done was worse. They had committed cultural genocide while keeping their victims alive to suffer through it. This is monstrous, whispered diplomat Yathara. Chen turned to face her. Yes, it is. We know exactly how monstrous it is. That's why it works. Speaker Valdris pulsed with distress. Ambassador Chen, surely you understand that such actions cannot be permitted in civilized space. The Council must take measures to prevent... To prevent what? Chen interrupted. To prevent humans from defending themselves when attacked? To prevent us from responding when our children are murdered? She walked closer to the speaker's position. Speaker Valdris, let me make something very clear. What happened to the Vorthak was not a violation of galactic law. It was human law. And human law is very simple. You kill our children, we kill your future. But the proportionality, began another delegate, is perfect. Chen cut him off. The Vorthak took away the futures of 847 human children. So we took away the future of their entire civilization. They will never threaten anyone's children again because they will never be in a position to threaten anyone. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species present began calculating how many children lived on their own worlds, and what the consequences might be if anything happened to human children in their space. What do you want from us? Elder Kaiseth asked quietly. Chen returned to the speaking platform and activated a holographic display. The image showed a formal document written in multiple languages. We want the Vorthak Accords, she announced. A new treaty that will govern how civilized species interact with humanity. The document appeared on screens throughout the chamber. As delegates began reading, their expressions grew increasingly alarmed. The first article established absolute protection for human civilian populations, with any attack resulting in immediate total war authorization. The second article granted humanity veto power over all Galactic Council military actions. The third article created a system of species-level consequences for any harm to human children. But it was the fourth article that truly horrified them. Mutual defense obligations? Speaker Valdris read aloud. Any species under human protection shall receive full military support against aggression? Chen nodded. We're offering a choice. You can sign the accords and gain the protection of Earth's military. Your children will be safe because they'll be our children too. Anyone who harms them will face the same fate as the Vorthak. And if we refuse? Asked Ambassador Thexitar. Chen's expression remained calm. Then you're not under our protection. What happens to your children becomes your own responsibility. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Species that refused to sign the accords would be left to face the galaxy alone, knowing that humanity might view them as potential enemies rather than allies. This is extortion, protested Councillor Vexthai. No, Chen replied. This is evolution. The galaxy is changing. You can change with it or you can end up like the Vorthak. Several delegates began arguing among themselves, their voices rising as they debated the implications of the human demands. Some called for immediate rejection of the accords. Others argued for negotiation. A few quietly suggested that signing might be the wisest course of action. Chen waited patiently for the noise to die down, then spoke again. You have 7 standard days to decide. After that, the accords become non-negotiable. And what happens in 7 days if we refuse? Elder, Kaiseth asked. Chen looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of different species. In 7 days, if you refuse, we withdraw from the Galactic Council. We close our borders to all alien contact, and we begin preparing for the day when one of your species makes the same mistake the Vorthak made. The silence that followed was deafening. You would cut yourselves off from galactic civilization? Speaker Valdris asked in disbelief. If necessary, Chen replied. Humans survived 10,000 years before we knew aliens existed. We can survive 10,000 more if we have to. The question is whether you want to be our partners in building a safer galaxy, or whether you want to be potential threats that we have to plan for. As the implications sank in, delegates began to realize the true scope of the choice they faced. The humans weren't just demanding specific concessions, they were reshaping the entire foundation of galactic politics. Species that had interacted as equals for millennia were being forced to choose between accepting human dominance or risking human enmity. And after seeing what happened to the Vorthak Empire, the choice wasn't really a choice at all. Chen gathered her documents and prepared to leave. 7 days, she repeated. After that, we'll know which species value their children enough to protect them, and which species are willing to gamble with their futures. As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, the remaining representatives sat in stunned silence. The galaxy they had known for thousands of years had ended. What came next would depend on how many of them were wise enough to accept that fact. In the corridors outside the chamber, Ambassador Chen allowed herself a small smile. The hardest part was over. Now they just had to wait and see how many species were smart enough to choose survival. Behind her, the greatest gathering of alien civilizations in galactic history began the process of surrender. They just didn't know it yet. The vote came exactly 7 days later. Ambassador Chen walked into the Galactic Council chamber and found something she had never seen before. Absolute silence. No side conversations between delegates, no shuffling of documents, no ambient noise of translation devices. 200 of the galaxy's most powerful species sat in perfect quiet, waiting to discover what their future would look like. Speaker Valdris floated at the center of the chamber, his energy form more subdued than Chen had ever seen it. The ancient being who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations looked older somehow, as if the weight of the decision ahead had aged even his immortal essence. The council will come to order, Valdris announced, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. We gather today to vote on the Vorthak Accords as proposed by the human delegation. Chen took her seat in the human section and watched as holographic displays activated throughout the chamber. The Accords appeared in every known galactic language, their terms stark and uncompromising in any translation. Over the past 7 days, every major government in the galaxy had debated the human demands. Some had called emergency sessions of their highest councils. Others had consulted ancient advisors who had lived through previous galactic crises. A few had even attempted to build military alliances that might allow them to resist human pressure. But in the end, they all reached the same conclusion that Elder Kaiseth had voiced in a private meeting the day before. We can submit to human terms, or we can end up like the Vorthak. There is no third option. Before we proceed to the vote, Speaker Valdris continued, I will note that several species have requested permission to address the Council. Ambassador Thextar of the Zephyrian hegemony rose from his seat. His species had been spacefaring for over 5,000 years, longer than almost any other civilization in the galaxy. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of eons. Fellow delegates, Thextar began, I have lived through 7 major galactic conflicts in my lifetime. I have seen empires rise and fall, species ascend to greatness or decline into obscurity, but I have never witnessed anything like what the humans have accomplished in the past week. He paused, looking around the chamber. The Vorthak Empire was not some minor power. They controlled over 400 star systems. Their military had never known defeat. Their culture had survived for 2 millennia, and the humans erased all of it in less than 72 hours. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Everyone knew the facts, but hearing them stated so bluntly made them more frightening. Some of you may be wondering if we should resist these human demands, Thextar continued. Let me share what my government's military analysis concluded. A holographic display activated above his seat, showing tactical projections that made several delegates gasp. In a theoretical conflict between humanity and the rest of the galaxy combined, human forces would achieve total victory within 6 months, not because they have more ships or better weapons, but because they understand warfare in ways we have forgotten. The display shifted to show footage from the destruction of Vorthak's sacred worlds. They don't fight to win territory or gain resources. They fight to eliminate threats permanently. They don't follow rules of engagement that limit civilian casualties. They target the things their enemies care about most. And they don't stop until their enemies no longer exist as functional civilizations. Thextar deactivated the display and looked directly at Ambassador Chen. The Zephyrian hegemony will vote to accept the Vorthak Accords, not because we approve of human methods, but because we are wise enough to recognize superior force when we see it. He sat down to scattered murmurs of agreement from around the chamber. Elder Kaiseth spoke next, his massive Krex shell reflecting the chamber's lighting. I am old enough to remember when the galaxy was a more violent place, he rumbled. Wars between species were common, planets were burned, populations were enslaved. It took millennia of evolution for us to develop the civilized society we now enjoy. He gestured toward the human delegation with one of his claws. The humans remind us that civilization is not a natural state. It is something that must be protected. And sometimes, protection requires the threat of overwhelming violence. Kaiseth's shell clicked thoughtfully. My species has been debating these accords for 7 days. We have considered the philosophical implications, the political consequences, the moral dimensions, but in the end we keep coming back to one simple fact. Under human protection, our children will be safer than they have ever been. The Elder's voice grew stronger. The Krex Coalition votes to accept the Vorthak Accords. We welcome Earth as the galaxy's protector, because we understand that true protection requires the willingness to be absolutely ruthless toward those who threaten the innocent. One by one, other delegates rose to announce their positions. The Crystalline Union voted to accept, citing the need for stability in uncertain times. The Aquatic Coalition voted to accept, acknowledging that their pacifist philosophy required someone else to provide security. The Insectoid Collective voted to accept, arguing that the survival of their hive required pragmatic decisions. As the votes accumulated, it became clear that the galaxy had made its choice. Some delegates spoke of reluctant acceptance. Others praised human strength. A few admitted that they were simply afraid of what might happen if they refused, but they all voted the same way. Finally, Speaker Valdris called for the formal tally. The motion to adopt the Vorthak Accords passes by a vote of 197 in favor, 0 opposed, 3 abstentions. The chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. In a single vote, 200 galactic civilizations had agreed to submit to human military authority. The era of equals cooperating in the Galactic Council had ended. The era of human dominance had begun. Ambassador Chen rose and walked to the speaking platform one final time. "Thank you for your wisdom," she said simply. "Earth accepts the responsibility you have placed on us." She activated a holographic display that showed star maps of human-controlled space. Effective immediately, all species that have signed the accords are under Earth's protection. Any attack on your worlds, your ships, or your people will be considered an attack on humanity itself. The response will be swift and absolute. The display shifted to show human defense force positions throughout the galaxy. Our fleets are already moving to establish protective cordons around your most vulnerable colonies. Our intelligence services are monitoring potential threats to galactic stability. Our diplomatic corps stands ready to mediate disputes before they escalate to violence. Chen paused, letting her words sink in. But remember, protection is a two-way street. Species under human protection are expected to maintain peaceful relations with their neighbors. You will not start wars that we will have to finish. You will not commit atrocities that we will have to answer for. And you will never, under any circumstances, harm human citizens. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Human protection came with human oversight. "What about species that didn't sign the accords?" asked a delegate from the back of the chamber. Chen looked toward the 3 abstaining delegations: the nomadic, wanderers, the isolated remnant, and the proud solitaries. All 3 were species that had always preferred independence to cooperation. "They remain free to make their own choices," Chen replied. "But they do so without our protection. If they encounter threats they cannot handle alone, they should not expect Earth to intervene." The message was clear. The galaxy was dividing into 2 camps, those under human protection and those on their own. Speaker Valdris floated down, closer to Chen's position. "Ambassador, what happens now? How will this new arrangement function in practice?" Chen smiled. "It will function very simply, Speaker Valdris. Earth will ensure that no species under our protection ever has to fear for the safety of their children. In return, we expect those species to support the kind of galaxy where such protection is necessary." She gestured toward the memorial wall that had been installed during the week of deliberations. 847 names carved in stone, representing the children who had died on New Geneva. "This memorial will remain here as a reminder of why things changed. Every delegate who enters this chamber will see those names and remember what happens when someone makes the mistake of thinking human children are acceptable casualties." Chen gathered her documents and prepared to leave. "The age of civilized warfare is over," she announced. "The age of absolute protection has begun. Your children are safe because we will destroy anyone who threatens them. Your civilizations will endure because we will eliminate any force that tries to end them." She walked toward the chamber exit, then paused and looked back. "This is the memorial we built for the children of New Geneva. Not a statue or a monument, but a guarantee that no child in the galaxy will ever die the way they did." As Chen left the chamber, the remaining delegates sat in stunned silence. They had just witnessed the most fundamental shift in galactic politics since the founding of the Council. The balance of power that had existed for thousands of years was gone, replaced by human hegemony, backed by the demonstrated willingness to commit cultural genocide. But as the shock wore off, many delegates began to feel something unexpected: relief. For the first time in galactic history, they knew with absolute certainty that their children were safe. Not because of laws or treaties or diplomatic agreements, But because there was a species in the galaxy willing to destroy entire civilizations to protect the innocent, the humans had kept their promise. They had built a memorial for the children of New Geneva. That memorial was the new Galactic Order itself, a system where anyone who harmed children would face consequences so terrible that no rational being would ever risk them. In the corridors outside the chamber, representatives from dozens of species began making plans for their new reality. They would need to establish formal communication channels with Earth's military. They would need to coordinate their defense systems with human forces. They would need to adjust their foreign policies to account for human oversight. Most importantly, they would need to make sure their own citizens understood the new rules of galactic civilization. The rules were simple. Human children were inviolate. Species under human protection were safe, and anyone who threatened either would discover what total war actually meant. Within a year, the changes were visible throughout the galaxy. Pirates and raiders who had terrorized shipping lanes for centuries simply disappeared, eliminated by human forces that gave no quarter. Border disputes that had simmered for decades were resolved quickly through human mediation, backed by overwhelming force. Civilian casualties in military conflicts dropped to nearly zero as every species understood the consequences of harming non-combatants. The Vorthak refugees, scattered across dozens of worlds, served as living reminders of what happened to those who violated the new order. Their children grew up speaking alien languages, following alien customs, knowing that their ancestral culture existed only in historical databases. And in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, the memorial wall stood as an eternal warning. 847 names carved in stone, representing the moment when humanity revealed its true nature to the galaxy. The children of New Geneva had died in an accident, but their deaths had purchased something no treaty or law had ever achieved: absolute safety for every child in known space. The galaxy had learned that humans did not build monuments to their dead. They built certainties.